Welcome to the Oasis of Faith. Let's turn in our Bibles, if you would please, this morning to two openings. The first one is found in Amos chapter 3, and the second one in Leviticus 23. And as you're turning there, if you would please say this after me. Say, "This is my Bible. I am what it says I am. I have what it says I have. I can do what it says I can do. Today I will be taught the Word of God. I boldly confess. My mind is alert. My heart is receptive. And I will never be the same. In Jesus' name, amen." All right, did you find Amos chapter 3? All right, I want to start in verse 7 as we begin talking about the Jewish feast and the rapture of the church. The prophet Amos here in the Old Testament, he writes something that a lot of us know and we can probably quote. But if this is the first time you've ever read this, I pray that you take heed to what it says here. Amos says, "Surely the Lord will do nothing." Underline that in your Bible. The Lord will do nothing. Say that after me. The Lord will do nothing, but he reveals his secret unto his servants, the prophets. Okay? Now, I'm not telling you this morning that I'm a prophet. I'm not here for that because I'm not a prophet. I know my place and I stay in my place. I'm not an apostle. I'm not a prophet. I'm not an evangelist. God had called me and anointed me to be a pastor and a teacher. And that's where I stay. But he says, Amos says that God will do nothing, but he reveals his secret unto his servants, the prophets. Now, the Jewish prophet Amos recorded that God declared this in his word. So if God declared it in his word and he used a prophet to speak this word, then I think we would do well if we listened to what the prophet had to say. Would you agree? He said he would do nothing except first he would reveal it to his servants, and then he qualifies what they are, his servants, the prophets. So evidently he didn't say he would reveal everything to everybody. Right. Do you know why that God does not reveal everything to everybody? Do you know why? Because everybody can't handle it. Not only that, if God revealed everything to everybody, do you remember when you were in grade school? I remember when I was in the fourth grade, I think it was, and the teacher brought us all up in the class, and she lined us up, and she started with one little girl at the end of the line, and she whispered something in her ear. You remember that? Did anybody else that happen in your school? Huh? And then by the time it got down to the 30 or 35th kid in your classroom, it got down to the end. It was totally different. It was nothing the way it originally started. Well, that's why God can't reveal it to everybody. That's why, and I'm just being very honest with you now, this is why I'm not moved by a lot of so-called prophets today. Amen. And especially these that get a new word every other day. Right. Yeah. Because when God spoke to his prophets under the old covenant, there were times when he would go maybe a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years when he would speak to his prophets, and then he wouldn't speak to them again until, like I say, a year, 5, 10 years later, he would have them give them another word. And yet you got these guys now on YouTube, man, they got a new word every day. Right. And so you don't know, and it's sad because, see, the church, this is why Jesus said, don't let men deceive you. And just because they say they're a prophet and they're on television or they're on YouTube or whatever, that doesn't make them a prophet. That's right. That's right. They're a prophet in their own mind. You've heard of people that are legends in their own minds? Same thing. I'm not trying to knock that. I'm just simply saying, but if you do what if you take the time to go listen to everybody that says they're a prophet, how come nobody's in agreement? And I told you about the one that saw the jello mountains in heaven, mountains made out of jello and ponds made out of pudding and all this stuff, and cows driving tractors in heaven. That's not a prophet. That's nonsense, folks. And if you don't rightly divide the word of truth, that's why God gave us the Bible. Because if I hear a prophet speak a word, I'm going to the Bible immediately to find out, to see whether or not what they said is lining up with the word. And if it doesn't, you know where that word's going? Give me the nearest trash can. So I don't go around flipping channels just to listen to what somebody has to say. Amen. Because all they can do is say the same thing again, just word it differently. You with me? Yep. But a true prophet will be led by the Spirit of God, and he will say what God wants him to say. Now, God used Amos here to talk to his people. And he said, I will reveal my secrets, God's saying through the prophet. I will reveal his secrets unto my servants, and he qualifies them as his prophets. Amen. Not Satan's prophets. Big difference. And if you think Satan don't have any prophets, that's not good English, honey, you got another thing coming. That's right. Man, I can take you to the Old Testament in the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, and I can show you the Elijah the prophet, where he got so fed up with Baal and all the Baal worshipers and all the false prophets, he called all 450 of them together. He called them up on Mount Carmel, and he exposed them all. And do you know what happened after he exposed them all? Read your Bible. What did he do? Huh? He cut their heads off. False prophets. Say, thank God, I live under the new covenant. And you better thank God, maybe your favorite prophet is living under the new covenant too. Come on. Just saying. Just saying. So from the old covenant now to the new covenant, Genesis to Revelation, God provides, now listen, he provides a picture. Everyone say a picture. A picture. Picture, say after picture. He provides picture after picture of his entire plan for mankind. And one of the most startling prophetic pictures is outlined for us in the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament and the 23rd chapter. So you got your finger there? All right, so flip over now to Leviticus chapter 23. Now, at this particular time in Leviticus chapter 23, the nation of Israel has come out of Egyptian bondage after nearly 460 years of bondage. God gets them out into the wilderness. He starts giving them a plan. Now, by the way, just let me add this. As they came out, every one of them came out, over 1 million people, they came out millionaires. They had all kinds of wealth, but they had no place to spend it. Right. And the reason they had no place to spend it was because God had a plan for the wealth that he had told them to take from the Egyptians. Amen. So if we could just break it down, they got it from the Egyptians, but who gave it to them? God did. God just used the Egyptians. God's getting ready to strip the wealth out of the hands of this wicked world out here. Amen. Are you hearing me? Amen. Just like he did for the children of Israel, and he took it out of Pharaoh and the wicked people's hands, and he put it over to the hands of his people. He's getting ready to do it once again before Jesus comes back for his church. Amen. Well, I don't believe that, Pastor. No problem. No problem. I'll take yours. Amen. You don't have to believe it. I'll take it. Amen. Well, I just don't agree with that. Well, you don't have to agree. You don't even have to believe it, because I guarantee you'll never see it. Right. But I will. Amen. Why? Because God has me. He has some things he wants me to do with it. Just like he had a plan for the children of Israel when they got out into the wilderness, because he wanted them to build him a tabernacle, or a place where he could meet with his people. And this tabernacle was designed and made so that wherever they went, wherever they traveled, day or night, they were led by a cloud during the day and a fire by night. It was built and designed so they could pick it up and move it from place to place. And God's presence would always be with his people.
Amen.
That's why it was called a tabernacle. When we get over to the Feast of Tabernacles, we'll explain a little bit more about it, okay?
Amen.
Because God promised in the last days, he promised that once again, he would dwell with us again.
Amen.
Just like he dwelled with his people, he would dwell with us again.
Yes.
Okay? They'll be my people and I will be their God. So did you find Leviticus? All right. So now let's look at these feasts of the Lord. Okay? Leviticus chapter 23. Now we're going to take a little bit of time, so I hope you're not in a hurry. And we may not get through the whole chapter of 23 today, but we'll get through it eventually. I want to start in verse 1. It says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say unto them, concerning the feasts of the Lord." That's a good place, I would say, to underline something in your Bible. Concerning the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Now, simply put, another term for the word convocations is meetings or assembly. That's all it is. It's a meeting. Right now, whether you realize it or not, we're having a holy convocation. Okay? Why? Because this meeting is dedicated to the Lord. He said, "Even these are my feasts." Another word for feast here could be festival. Now, the word feast in the Hebrew, now I want to give you this word because this is very important. The word feast in the Hebrew is the word moed, M-O-W-E-D, which literally means appointed times. Now, this is very, very important. Moed means seasons, actually in the Hebrew, seasons or appointed times. Say appointed times. Now, what is so significant about an appointed time? Huh? You plan for it. But what else? You expect it to happen. But what else? It doesn't change. It's the same. An appointed time does not change. So God is telling them that these feasts that he's about to introduce to them will not change, because they're appointed by him to be the time, the season, or the appointed time for these particular festivals or feasts. Israel's sacred year now contained, now write this down if you're taking notes, it contained one weekly feast or Sabbath and 7 annual feasts or Sabbaths. But the annual feasts were related to the weekly feast. The weekly feast was the Sabbath. Now let me deal with this just for a moment, because you still have denominations fighting over the Sabbath. You know, and the truth of the matter is this. If you really, really want to get technical, okay, can I just do a little bit of history real quick and explain to you why Jews still celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday? Okay, it actually starts on Friday evening and goes till Saturday evening. Because they take the Bible literally. Because the Bible said the evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day. The evening and the morning were the third day. So they take it literally that the Sabbath actually begins in the evening and goes till the next evening. So the evening begins at 6 p.m. and it doesn't stop until 6 p.m. the following day. That's when the new day begins. So it goes from evening to evening is the day. So the Sabbath begins on Friday evening at 6 p.m. and goes till Saturday 6 p.m. the following day. So people get hung up about Jews celebrating the Sabbath on Saturday. I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with Christians celebrating the Sabbath on Saturday. I don't have any problem with it. I have Sabbath every day. Me personally, I do. You do whatever you want. But I'm going by what Jesus said. He said that God never made man for the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath for the man. All the Sabbath means is it's a day of rest. Why? Because it was on the seventh day that God rested from all of his work that he created the first 6 days. So God's smarter than man. God told them, he said, don't work 7 days. He said, you need 1 day off. He even went as far as he told them, he says, because they lived in a gregarian society, they were farmers, they planted. He said, even your fields, when you plant your fields, he said, grow your crops for 6 years, but give it a year off. Let it rest. And the reason why we have the problem with our food in the world today is because of all the chemicals and the garbage that they put in the ground so they can keep pumping food out and making food bigger and no nutrition in it at all. And then that's why people are dying with cancer and all kinds of these diseases they can't heal, because they put all these chemicals and stuff into the ground and into the food that we eat. And then I wonder why we're still alive. If we would just follow God's plan and give the ground off, give it off a year. But see, commercialism, our government, and people's greed want them to produce more and make more money. Are you with me?
That's right.
So the more that they can produce, the more money they can make. And then, actually, we could, just here in the United States alone, if we did what God said to do, we could feed the entire world. The United States could. But yet there are people all over the world starving. See, they don't want us to grow enough food. That's why in some places they even pay farmers not to grow food. We don't want to flood the market with too much corn. No, because then the price of corn will go down. Well, why don't you just do what God says? Grow it for 6 years. You remember, well, I don't have time to but I can go back into Egypt when they remember the famine.
Yeah.
They stored it up.
Right.
Stored it up for 7 years, then boom, the famine hit. Well, they had enough to sustain them, didn't they? Through the famine. Because God gave them a plan. But see, our politicians and all of our people that run all the... They're so smart, they're so more intelligent than God, that they don't have time to listen to the Word, that we'll just do it our way because we want to line our pockets.
Amen.
Where am I at? So, the weekly feast was the Sabbath, and the 7 annual feasts were, and if you're taking notes, write these down. These were the 7 annual feasts. So they had one weekly feast, which was the 7th day of the week, and then there were 7 annual feasts that took place. And these 7 annual feasts were, number 1, Passover. Number 2, unleavened bread. Number 3, first fruits. Number 4, Pentecost. Number 5, trumpets. Number 6, atonement. And the 7th was tabernacles. Now, all of these feasts proclaimed the work of Christ in leading up to God's plan of redemption for Israel and all of mankind. Each one of these feasts had a purpose and a plan. So when I would ask my friends who were Christian and then all of a sudden they become, I don't know, what do they call them now? What is it? No, they're not Seventh-day Adventists. They're new Christians. They're still Christians. They believe in Christ, but they follow the feast and they Hebraic movement and Messianic movement and all the stuff that they're doing now. And all you Christians just don't understand why we do that. Well, explain to me why. But none of them would. They want me to join their movement, but no one would explain their movement to me. And Dr. Summerall, prophet of God, told me years ago, every denomination or every new thing has a movement. So when it comes, flush it and go on. So that's what I do. I'm going to stick with the Word. And then at the Lord's timing, when the time is right, in His timing, He begins to reveal things that I want to know about. He'll show it to me. I learned this from Charles Capps years ago. And Charles, I remember when the Lord started, probably one of the greatest, if not the best. I'm next to, to Brother, talking, when you talk about Brother Hagin, Brother Copeland, Fred Price, men like that. But Charles Capps was probably one of the greatest teachers that I ever heard on faith and confession. And I remember when the Lord told Charles, he said, I want you to start teaching on end times, end time prophecy. And he asked the Lord, he said, Lord, Charles, this man, he was a farmer all of his life, and a literal farmer. And he got him off the tractor and got him preaching and teaching the Bible. And the Lord told him, he said, I want you to start teaching on end times. And Charles said, but Lord, he said, I don't know anything about end times. And he said, well, neither does anybody else, but they're trying to teach on it. So he said, if you'll listen to me, I'll teach you on end times so that you can teach my people. So Charles began to teach on it. And one thing that I learned under him years ago was this. When you see something in the scripture you don't understand, before, Jerry, here it comes, before you throw the baby out with the bathwater, set it on the shelf and begin to pray about it. Amen. And don't quit praying and confessing the word and believing God for revelation of it until God gives it to you. Amen. And that's how the Lord gave me the revelation on Daniel chapter 12 that I just couldn't grasp. There was a blockage there, and I just prayed it and prayed it and prayed it and prayed it through till finally the Lord revealed it to me. Amen. That's a whole different story. But anyway, so these feasts all had a plan for God's redemptive work for Israel and for the church. So God, whether you realize it or not, God has carefully planned and orchestrated the timing. The timing and the sequence. Now remember what the word moed in the Hebrew means? Appointed times. Remember that? Yep. Okay. But he's carefully planned and orchestrated the timing and sequence of each of these feasts to reveal to us his special plan. And as God began to show this to me, I thought, now if this may get boring to you, I apologize. But if you've got a heart to learn, you're going to say, wow, I never saw that before. Wow, that makes sense. Wow, where'd that come from? I've read that 1,000 times. I never saw that before. I did. So God has this plan. Now, verse 3, you still there? Now, here's God's instruction still. He says, 6 days shall work what? Be done. But the seventh day is the what? Sabbath of what? Rest. See, God knew you needed 1 day off. So if you're working 7 days a week, like I did for years and years, and I didn't just work 7 days a week. I worked 15, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was a fool. I'm just telling you, I was a fool. I can pick on me. I'm not talking about you, so don't get offended. I was a fool. But God was the one who's telling us you need rest. So if you're working 7 days a week, you're not protecting your health. Amen. You're not getting the rest you need. Right. Everybody needs rest. Right. He said, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. There it is again, or meeting. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your what? Dwelling. In all of your dwellings. So now, the Feast of Sabbath stood apart as being God's rest from Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. Now, also, it was a prophecy. Now listen to this. It was a prophecy and a promise of the rest that would be received in Christ that remained to the people of God, which we now presently enjoy. Or in other words, whereas the Sabbath then was a day, then Now it's a person. The Sabbath is a person now. The person of who? The person of Jesus Christ. You never saw that before, did you? See, this is how good God is. So acceptance of Him now, Jesus, and resting in Him presently constitutes the keeping of the Sabbath. He didn't tell you what day you had to do it. He just said as long as you do it. It's kind of like when Paul was giving the instructions about taking communion. He didn't tell you how often to take communion. You can do it once a week, once a month, once a year, once every 10 years. He didn't tell you how often to do it. He just said as often as you do it how? In remembrance of Him. Why are you taking communion? I'm remembering the Lord's death. I remember His death, burial, resurrection, and I'm remembering that. I'm remembering the price that He paid for me. So what are we doing here? We're resting in Him. Excuse me. So the feast now, as we look at these feasts now, the feasts were divided up into spring and fall feasts. So let's do this first. Let's look at the spring feast first. Can we do that? All right. We'll start with the spring feast, and the first one here that we're going to look at is the Feast of Pesach. If you're taking notes, it's Pesach, or in just modern English, Passover. That's the first one. Passover was a spring feast. It was a time when God told them to take a lamb, to sacrifice it, because when they were in Egypt, He was sending the death angel. And as long as the angel saw the blood of that lamb on the lintels or the doorposts of their homes, that death angel would pass over. And then that would be a reminder to them throughout history, from generation to generation, it would be an everlasting covenant and reminder to them of how the Lord passed over. Amen. Verse 4, you there? All right, He said, these are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons, or their moeds, or appointed times. In the 14th day of the first month. All right, let's clear this up. The 14th day of the first month on the Jewish calendar is not January the 1st, or January the 14th. The Jewish calendar does not begin. Now listen, they have different calendars, but the Jewish calendar begins in the spring. You with me? Yeah. Say springtime. Springtime. Because that's when the earth has come out of its death cycle. Cold, winter, death. You know what I'm talking about? Where the trees, the leaves fall off, they turn whatever, and I mean everything's just dead. Springtime, everything comes back to life. Okay? So, this is why I know personally, Jesus was born in springtime. As a matter of fact, He was born, you ready for this? Can you handle this? You really want to get technical? He was born at the same time He was crucified, at Passover time. He wasn't born in December. Couldn't have been. Why? Because it's proof positive. They've proven it. That lambs, sheep, they only give birth once a year. And when the shepherds were out tending their flocks, if it had been 30 degrees below zero outside, they ain't going to be in the fields. I'm telling you that right now. It was the springtime because they knew that their herds were going to be giving birth, because they only give birth once a year. That'll mess up your theology real quick. But we paid somebody to help us misunderstand the Bible. And we talk about 3 wise men who came to see Jesus. The Bible never said 3 wise men. The Bible said it was wise men, plural. It didn't say 3. Yeah, but they brought him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, it wasn't 3 cigar boxes full of gold, little gold coins. Like we put on in Christmas plays. And isn't that so cute? And we have our babies dress up like little shepherds and they're holding this. Dumb. Garbage. And that's why we've got a world full of unbelieving people out there that don't believe the Bible. Because the church has lied to them. And they fed them this junk, hook, line, and sinker. Then they found out there was no Santa Claus, no Easter Bunny, no Tooth Fairy. Now they think there's no Jesus. And if you told your parents about Santa Claus, shame on you. We never told our kids about Santa Claus. Not once. We told them from the time they were born, Mom, the Lord bless Mom and Daddy, where we could buy you what you wanted for Christmas. There were no surprises. You tell us what you want. We're not taking nothing back. You want that, you're getting it. So we ain't taking it back. You got it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Well, it's the thought that counts. No, if you really thought about it, you'd buy somebody something they really wanted and not buy something that you hope they like. So go ask them. My son came by the house this morning to get his birthday present. He knew exactly what was in the card. There's no surprises. He opened them up. He goes, hey, love the green stuff, Dad. Why? Now he can go get what he wants. He ain't got to take nothing back. He ain't got to return a thing. Huh? Or somebody, well, I hope you like this. I hope it fits. It doesn't. Well, I hope you like it. Well, I don't. You don't know how many bottles of cologne I poured down the sink. How many ties I got for Christmas. Hope you like it. I don't. No, if I want something, I go buy it. I'm not waiting for somebody to buy me something I like. I go get it. My wife knows. I learned a long time ago when we married, I ain't buying her nothing. I tried it one time. Bought her a dress. I said, that was it, man. She looked at that like, what am I going to do with this? You want me to wash dishes with it or what? She didn't like it. So you know what I do? I said, give her the money, let her go get what she wants. Now, I don't have to go sit there and wait. She can go anytime she wants. She don't have to wait for me. She can go get whatever she wants. If you're into that stuff, is what I'm saying. Now, if you're into all the, no, I ain't got time for it. To me, it's just another day. And first off, if we're going to celebrate Christmas, let's find out when Jesus was born, and let's buy him a birthday present. Let's buy him a birthday present. Jesus, what would you like for your birthday this year? Well, I couldn't afford to buy Jesus a present. How do you know? I heard a man, Dr. Price told a man years ago. He said, if you want to buy the Lord something for his birthday, he says, you can do it. He says, why don't you buy him a new TV camera? He said, what do you mean? He says, they're only $75,000 a piece. He goes, we need some new TV cameras in the church, so by buying a new camera, he said, that's buying the Lord a new. And he goes, I'll do it. And he did. The man did. So, but see, people don't think about that stuff. If it's really Jesus' birthday, why are we... December 25th is not my birthday. It's not even Jesus' birthday. Your birthday is your birthday. Now, you celebrate your birthday any way you want. I'll celebrate mine my way, and you do it your way, and we'll just stay in love in Jesus, all right? Okay, that's just a point that I was making, okay? So now, it says in verse 5, in the 14th day of the first month. So now the first month, according to the Jewish calendar, is the month of, according to the Bible, it is the month of Abib, A-B-I-B, or I put slash, Nisan, N-I-S-A-N, not Nissan, Nisan. Some Jewish calendars say Nisan, some say Abib. And the 14th day of that month, the first month, at evening, he says, is what? Are you there? Verse 5? What is it? Yeah, what is it? Come on, help me. It's wait, whose Passover? The Lord's Passover. Now, notice there in that verse, it says, at evening. The words at evening really should read in the Hebrew, between evenings. Between evenings. So in essence, at any time from sunset of the one day to sunset the following day is the Lord's Passover. Passover figures into our redemption and was carried out by none other than the Lord Jesus Christ. So Jesus now, ultimately, who was, John said, behold the Lamb of God, who what? Wait a minute, he takes away what? Notice, the Passover lamb in the Old Covenant didn't take away the sin of the world. It took away the sin of the family, of each individual house. Every family had to kill a lamb. They had to sacrifice a lamb. But when it came to our redemption, there was only one sacrificial lamb, and that was Jesus. And he took away your sin, my sin. He took away the world's sin. Now, I could spend a whole week right there just on the sin of the world and taking away the sin. Because Jesus didn't just take it away like the lamb in the Old Testament did. He annihilated sin. Amen. He wiped it out. Amen. You with me? All right. Next comes the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, see, I'm going to get somewhere with this. I know, but I got to take my time. Because we're getting ready to enter in on Friday. We're getting ready to enter in to this holy time of the year. And especially when we get to the Feast of Trumpets, there was a reason why the trumpets had to be blown at a certain time. And they had to be blown a certain way and a certain number of times. And why do you think the Apostle Paul said, at the last trump, when the trumpet sounds, we shall be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord? See, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm so excited about this. But I believe what's going to happen is I believe the rapture is going to take place on the Feast of Trumpets. And when we hear the trumpet sound, see now Church of Christ, they don't have to worry about this. You know why? Because they don't believe in musical instruments. So they're not going to hear the trumpet when it sounds. Now I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. They don't believe in any instruments. My goodness. What are they going to do when they get to heaven? They see all the instruments God has. You talk about an orchestra. Right. He's got instruments up there that you and I, Alan, you ready? He's got instruments up there you've never seen. Stringed instruments, wind instruments, all kinds of, oh my goodness. So now comes the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Verse 6. Now notice he said on the 14th day was the Passover. And on the 15th day, verse 6, of the same month, Abib, Nisan, is the what? So the very next day, guess what begins? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, let's deal with this because people have asked me, well, what does unleavened mean? It simply means the bread that they made could not have any kind of yeast. So when it talks about leaven or unleavened, no yeast. Could have no yeast in it. That's why the bread that they ate, the matzah, like when we take communion and we have the little wafer, that's bread, but there's no yeast in it. Because it represents unleavened bread. The bread you eat at home, you know, your Wonder Bread, that's loaded with yeast. Your sourdough bread, all those, your favorite breads, those are loaded with yeast. Now, there's nothing wrong with those. But at this particular time of the year, the bread could have no yeast. Right. Why? Anybody know why? Jesus told he told the people of his day, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Huh? Leaven represented sin. So that's why the bread could have no leaven in it. Because there couldn't be any sin in it. It represented that. You with me? Let's go on, and you'll see it as we go. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread or bread without yeast. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation or a meeting. You shall do no servile work therein, and there's no kind of work, none, zero. But after shall you offer an offering made, now watch this, made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. Now catch this. You must offer an offering to the Lord made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. In the 7th day is the holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. Now, the unleavened bread figured the perfect, unspotted, the unspotted, perfect life of Jesus Christ, which was offered up for our sacrifice. On the first and seventh day, no work was allowed to be done, signifying the salvation. Salvation is not by works, but by faith, according to Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Did you catch that? So God told him, you can't do any work. So in other words, you can't earn this. Just like we can't earn our salvation, it's all because of what Jesus did for us. You can't earn your salvation. You can't be Mr. Goody Two-Shoes or Miss Goody Two-Shoes. You can't be all that in a bag of potato chips, as everybody, oh, and aren't they wonderful? Oh, my goodness, whoopie-doo. It ain't got nothing to do with it. It's what Jesus did for you. He died for you. He paid your price. All right, you still with me? So now everyone should understand that we can know nothing of rest, of holiness, or fellowship except on the grounds of Jesus Christ only. And it's significant and beautiful to see that God's rest is spoken of in verse 3. I'm not going to make you go back, but anyway. The next thing is introduced is the blood of the Passover lamb, symbolizing the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Now, we're getting into verse 9 now, and we're going to see the Feast of First Fruits. Now, these are the spring feasts. Verse 9, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land, which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto who? Underline that in your Bible. This is a command. This was not a suggestion. God told him this. Verse 11. And you shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you on the morrow or the next day after the Sabbath. The priest shall what? He shall wave it. What's he going to do? He's going to wave it before the Lord. So now, the sheaf of the first fruits was to be waved on the day after the Sabbath, because that was the day that Christ rose from the dead out of the tomb. Did you catch that? Are you still with me? Yeah. Have I lost you yet? No. Okay, y'all are with. That's why I'm going slow. I know it's a lot to retain, but see, I don't have a lot of time because Jesus is coming. And I'm just trying to get as much information in you as possible before he comes back. Well, why is this relevant to my salvation? Why is it relevant? If that's your attitude, then nothing's relevant to your salvation. I know I used to think the same thing. Well, what's so special about the Sabbath? But see, when you start hungering for more of God and he starts revealing things to you, then you see how everything lines up and it points to Jesus. From the Old Testament, everything points directly to the New Testament and Jesus Christ. It all points to him. But yet there are still people that are trying to get to God without Jesus. And you can't do it. My goodness. So, not only did it point to the resurrection of Jesus out of the tomb, but no sin offering accompanied the sheaf because Jesus was sinless. Do you see how it just goes together? Jesus was sinless, so now the sheaf has to be sinless as well. Verse 12. And you shall offer that day, when you shall wave the sheaf, a he-lamb, or a male lamb, without blemish. We got to offer a lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering to the Lord. This symbolizes the perfection of Jesus Christ as he was given for the sin of mankind. Why? Because he was without sin. And God wouldn't just accept any male lamb. It had to be 1 year old. Actually, if you really want to get technical, Jewish tradition says that when you go back, they had to take a lamb and they had to raise that lamb, this baby lamb, for 1 year. And they had to keep this male lamb without blemish. They had to keep it in their home. Some of you would freak out. But yet they had to keep it in their home. It became part of their family. It became, I get it. I didn't think I ever could, but I get it. Because I got one dog at home. If he don't get his attention, he will do whatever he has to do to get his attention. I mean, and he'll jump right up in bed, fall over, flip over and on his back where his stomach's straight up in the air, and he ain't moving until you rub his belly. That's just the way it is. But what happens? They became attached to this lamb. It became a part of their family. Because 1 year from then till the following year, it had to be 1 year old, without blemish, without any spot. It had to be sinless, spotless. Then they had to cut its throat and offer it up for a sacrifice. How could they do that? I couldn't do that. But they had to every year to satisfy God's demands of justice. They had to do it every year. You still with me? I know I'm running out of time. Just bear with me a couple more minutes, all right? Verse 13. And the meat offering. Now, see where it says meat offering? Okay, anytime in the Old Testament where you see a meat offering, that does not mean meat like beef, pork, chicken. That's not what it's referring to. The meat offering was a food offering. It was a food. And I'll show it to you in just a moment. It was any type of food that they had to offer to the Lord. And the meat offering thereof, and he's going to explain, shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour mixed with oil. Oh, now you getting it? So it's kind of like a cake, okay? An offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor or aroma, and a drink offering thereof shall be of wine, a fourth part of a hin. And a hin is just an amount, is all it is, okay? So don't get hung up on that. So the meat or food offering symbolized the perfect life of Christ. The mingled oil symbolizing the Holy Spirit in and on Jesus Christ. See that? The offering made by fire symbolizing the cakes which were burned on the altar, signifying the death of Christ, which was pleasing to the Father. And the drink offering symbolized the joy that comes comes to us from salvation. Verse 14. And you shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your God, and it shall be a statute or a law forever. Underline that in your Bible. See, and people get bent out of shape, but they don't. I'm not an Old Testament Christian. I'm a new Christian. Yeah, but God wrote this. He said, when God means forever, he meant forever. I don't have a problem with Jewish people doing it. Now, I don't do it, but if the Jewish people do it, I have no problem. Why? Because it's pointing them to Christ. So hopefully they will wake up and they will receive Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. You still with me? Now watch this very carefully because we're going to hit something right here. And you shall you shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor green ears until the selfsame day that you brought an offering unto the Lord. It shall be a statute or law forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. So now part of this offering was to be eaten by the priests, and part of it was to be burned on the altar. The first fruits symbolized the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Are you with me? And are mentioned also, first fruits, in Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 30. Listen, in which when the priest presented the first fruits to the Lord and prayed over them, the blessing of the Lord would remain in the house of the one who brought them specifically to who? Are we reading the same Bible? Why are you all afraid to say it? Who did God tell him to bring it to? Why are you afraid to say that? Well, you're not a priest. No, I'm not. But I represent the priesthood. See, when you bring your tithes and offerings here and put them in the basket, you're bringing them to the Lord, right? Well, same thing, but somebody has to handle it. Somebody has to bless it. Somebody has to speak over it. Are you with me? Am I making sense to you? See, there's a reason for everything, the way things happen. And Ezekiel gets into detail on this. All right. So now we're going to look real quick at the fourth feast here under the spring feast. And that's the feast of Shavuot or Pentecost. Same thing. Shavuot in Hebrew, Pentecost. The word Pentecost just simply means, you ready? It means 50. 50. That's all it means. Verse 15. And you shall count unto you from the morrow or the next day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths. All right, if there's one Sabbath per week and you have 7 Sabbaths, you have what? You have 49. And he said, and you got to bring it the day after. So there's your what? There's your 50th day. There it is. Now, the day after 7 complete weeks was the 50th day or the 50th week, or 50th day rather. Therefore, the name Pentecost, which actually means in the Hebrew 50 or 50th. Okay? That's what it means. Verse 16. Even unto the morrow of the next day, or the day of the next, till the next day, after the 7th Sabbath, shall you count, or number or count, 50 days. And you shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Okay? This was considered a thanksgiving offering, which contained no yeast, but only grain. You shall bring, verse 17, you shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves, and 2 2/10 deals. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked with leaven. Now this time, notice, they shall be baked with what? Leaven. With leaven this time. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. So now, the leaven or the yeast that we see was intended to foreshadow those who, even though filled now with the Holy Spirit and adorned with God's gifts and graces, still have, this is so powerful, even though you're born again, even though you're Spirit-filled, even though you've accepted Christ, the leaven here introduced in this bread represents the fact that you still have a sin nature. Are you seeing this? Is this powerful? My goodness. Although the sin nature dwells in us, it does not and should not rule and reign over us. Verse 18. I got to hurry up. Let me finish this up, and then next week we'll take up on the fall feast, and that's the Feast of Trumpets. We may be right on time. Verse 18, and you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock, and 2 rams and 2 rams shall be for a burnt offering unto the Lord, with their meat offering and with their drink offering, even an offering made by fire of a sweet savor or aroma unto the Lord. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs, and they shall be holy, and they shall be holy, and they shall be holy to the Lord. For who? For the priest. And you shall proclaim on the selfsame day that it may be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall do no servile work therein, to be a statute or law forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Now, God's command to do no work is repeated 10 times in connection with these feasts. Man's activities were forbidden to intrude themselves in salvation, which was divine and was perfect. Did you catch that? Yeah. God's plan of salvation, He will not allow any works. None at all. So God desired a happy, redeemed family and not slaves. That's why He told them, I want you to rest. I want you to serve me. See, God wanted us to serve Him out of a pure heart, not because we had to. God could have, if God wanted people to serve Him because they had to, He could have made a bunch of robots. But He wanted people to willfully want to serve Him and to love Him. That's why there are going to be a lot of people in for a big shock. When they stand before the Lord's going to say, hey, I just wanted you. But you didn't have time for me. I just wanted you to willfully come and love me and worship me and spend time with me, but you didn't have time for me. Oh, you were doing your own thing. Okay, well, all right, well, then I'm going to do my own thing. It was nice seeing you, and I hope you have a nice eternity in a place that smells like fire and sulfur. But anyway, I don't know what He's going to say, but I'm just using that as an illustration. Because see, even today in the church world, there's still too many Christians who are doing what they want to do. They do things without even praying about it. Sounds like a good idea. Huh? My goodness. Where am I at? So Pentecost now proclaimed Christ as the baptizer with the Holy Ghost. So Pentecost is tied. Did you catch that? It's tied in with this. So verse 22. And when you reap the harvest of your land, and you shall make it clean, make a clean riddance of the corners of your field when you reap, neither shall you gather any gleaning of your field or your harvest, and you shall leave unto the poor and to the stranger. I am the Lord your God. So He says, when you go out there in the fields and you start taking your crops in and reaping your harvest, He said, leave the corners alone. Don't go all the way to the edge. Don't go all the way to the corner. Don't leave those alone. Just get what you can and leave the outside perimeters. Leave those alone. Why? Those are for the poor. What's God saying here? It was for those who didn't own land and found themselves in hard times. And what God was doing here was, His law now it was His way of, you ready for this? It was God introducing His welfare system to the poor, not the government. Why? Didn't Jesus say Himself, the poor you'll have with you? Let me add something to that if we can. The poor you're always going to have with you, always. But so you're also going to have the lazy too.
That's right.
You're always going to have them. Always. You're always going to have people that want handouts. Somebody was shared a video with me the other day. Was talking about this guy that Somebody offered to buy this guy lunch. He goes, well, just give me the money where I can buy the lunch. No, you want the lunch or not? And the guy says, no, I want the money. And he goes, well, I don't carry cash. Yeah, you guys are always saying that. And then the next thing you know, he's cussing the guy out. The guy was going to buy him something to eat. Well, he wasn't hungry. He wanted the money.
That's right.
Jesus said, the poor you're always going to have, and I'll just say, the lazy you're always going to have too. Paul had to deal with it in his day. Paul was writing to the church at Thessalonica, and Paul said, I hear that there's some of you, it's been said that there's some of you who are busybodies not working at all. In other words, you in everybody's business and you ain't working. And then you know what Paul went on to say? What did he tell him? A man that what? A man that don't work, he don't eat. Now, they're always going to be poor with us. They're always going to be. And we can help them where we can. But this was God's way of introducing the welfare plan to the people. He said, so don't clean up the corners. Let them come and let them pick up the grain that they can live off of and eat off of food. Amen? All right. The next area we're going to get into are the fall feasts. We've covered the 4 spring feasts. Now we're going to cover the 3 spring feasts. Now this is going to get more interesting, I promise you now. Why? Because these first 4 that we looked at have already been fulfilled through Jesus Christ. But the next 3 have not been fulfilled. And the next one that's about to take place is coming up this Friday evening, beginning at 6 o'clock till Sunday, 6 p.m. And that's the Feast of Trumpets. So what am I telling you today? Be listening. Be listening. I'm not setting dates and times. And I'm going to tell you, and when I get to this, I'm going to tell you why we don't set dates and times. There's a reason for it. But if I tell you right now, you won't come back next Sunday. There's a reason for it. You get anything out of that? We trust the message has been a blessing to you. The announcer will give you more information, how you can obtain an audio or video of the message you've just heard. Remember, these broadcasts are made possible by the continued free will offerings of you, the viewers and listeners. Remember also, God loves you, we love you, and Jesus is Lord.